Jews in Israel and all the Jews worldwide, because this is not a localized thing against Jews in Israel. This is against Jews wherever they are. And fortunately, Jews are waking up to realize who their friends are and who their enemies are. And I'm not going to hesitate to mention our enemies, and they include the media and academia. In every rule there are exceptions, but the rule is that these are not our friends. These are people who would stand by if there was, God forbid, another Holocaust, and they would stand by and they would say, oh, we really feel bad for the dead Jews. But dare not defend yourself, because we like you when you're dead, and we'll show our sorrow for your suffering and pain. But you cannot defend yourself. This is the most despicable reaction that we're hearing from everyone, including our own president, including our own Secretary of State. Too many Palestinians killed. So why don't you complain to the Arabs for killing their people, their own people? It's disgusting how they're reacting to it, or the president of France. So we need God's protection, and with the trust in God that things we will win, we will prevail, not because of Israeli leaders. It's because God is on our side, and we have His protection. But tragically, in a war, there are casualties. We lost at least 40 soldiers in the battles in the last few weeks, in addition to the 1,400 souls that were murdered on October 7th and Simchas Torah. So I'm going to recite Psalm 20 as one of the most cited psalms, where we ask God for protection, and we make reference to the fact that they come with their chariots and with their horses. In other words, they come with physical ways of attacking. We come with God's protection. So I'm going to recite the psalm and then translate it into English. Lam natseach mizmor leDavid, yan chadinoi b'yom tzara, yisagev Hashem elehei yankev. Yishlach ezecha mikedesh mitzi yan yisadeka, yizker kol mechisecha ve'elascha yidash nesela, yitan lecha chiluvavecha v'chalatzascha yimalei, niran nebishuasecha v'shem eleheinu nidgail, Yimale Adonai kol mishalei secha. Ata yadaiti ki yeshi Adonai mashiach yanei mishmei kadshay b'gvuras yeshi yaminei. Ele barechev ve'ele basus imanachnu b'shem Adonai Eloheinu naskir. Hey makar uvenafol uvenachnu kamel meneseidad Adonai heshi amelch yaneinu v'yem kareinu. For the choir master, a psalm by David. May the Lord answer you on the day of distress. May the name of the God of Jacob fortify you. May He send your help from the sanctuary and support you from Zion. May He remember all your offerings and always accept favorably your sacrifices. May He grant you your heart's desire and fulfill your every counsel. We will rejoice in your deliverance and raise our banners in the name of our God. May the Lord fulfill all your wishes. Now I know that the Lord has delivered His anointed one, answering Him from His holy heavens with the mighty saving power of His right hand. Some rely upon chariots and some upon horses, but we rely upon and invoke the name of the Lord our God. They bend and fall, but we rise and stand firm. Lord, deliver us. May the King answer us on the day we call. The question is the title of the class. Is Judaism outdated? The title of the class is To Live as a Jew, but the subtitle is Judaism Outdated, and with that we'll begin. One of the challenges to Judaism has always been keeping up with the times, being in a world that is constantly changing and evolving. Do we have to keep up with the times? And is Judaism outdated? This is a religion that's 3,000 plus years old. And if you really think about it seriously, every culture in the world is by definition outdated no sooner as it appears. Because People are constantly changing. There's nothing that stays constant in this world, by definition, because the world is a product of creation, and the definition of creation is that it's an existence in flux. It never stays in one place. It's always changing. The only thing it doesn't change, of course, is God, and anything connected directly to God, which is the Torah. So by definition, Judaism is always modern, is always in vogue. And also, what proves that something is real? Things that are real are only so when you can test it. No matter what the conditions are, no matter what the circumstances of life are, if something remains constant, you know that that's true. I mentioned this many times. According to the Jerusalem Talmud, the word for truth in Hebrew, emet, I think I mentioned it a week ago or 2 weeks ago, emet means not just something is true and not a lie, but something that is totally consistent. The word emet or emes consists of 3 Hebrew letters: the first letter of the alphabet, the middle letter, the aleph, the mem, and the taf, the final letter. And only God is really emet because He is consistent from the beginning through the middle to the end. And that's the nature of Judaism. Judaism has been time-tested. We have had challenges from every direction. Jews have been challenged from those who want us dead, as we see today what's going on in the world. We were challenged by those who wanted us alive, but wanted us to suffer. I'm not going to identify which religions believe that. We were tested by those who want us to be alive, but want us to adapt to their way of thinking, to convert to another religion, whether it's a secular religion, and don't mistake secularism for non-religion. Atheists are the most fanatical people. I just heard this from what's his name, Dennis Prager. He once spoke to a group of atheists, a few hundred atheists, and he asked them, any of you ever have any doubts about your atheism? Not one person raised his hand. He says, you are fanatical religion. I don't know if he said those words, but you are fanatics. You're fanatically secular. That becomes a religion, and it has no basis. It's not based on logic. It's based on a belief that my life would be more comfortable if I don't have to submit myself to a higher authority. It's much easier. They say religion is a crutch. No, atheism is a crutch, because people feel guilty about not serving God. You feel guilty about it, you need a crutch to hold on to, so you then declare there is no deity, there is no creator. But anyhow, we were tested by every single movement, the Greeks, the Romans, the Christians, the Muslims. And you know what? We're still here, we're still strong, and we're growing and flourishing, and Judaism is becoming more and more prevalent. Yes, we had a major challenge in the last 250 years from secularism, from the so-called Enlightenment movement and other movements that broke away from Judaism, and yet they disappeared. The ones who remained are the people who are faithful to Judaism, and this will last for who knows how. I don't like to quote a certain publication, but I'm going to quote the New York Times for one good positive thing. That's the only positive thing I could think about them. There was an edition in the year 2000 about how the world will be like at the year 2100, 100 years. And they printed an edition of a newspaper in 100 years. And on the bottom, on the front page, candlelighting time, Shabbos candlelighting time was whatever the time was, because there was a few years in which someone paid for an advertisement. On the bottom of the front page, Shabbos candlelighting time. While everything else in the newspaper was different, everything would change. In 100 years, we expect everything to change. And with Hashem's help, the New York Times will not be around. That'll be one good change. But one thing they recognize, a non-Jewish editor recognized that that's one thing that remained constant. Jewish women will light Shabbos candles every Friday before sunset. So that's the one thing that was tested under all circumstances, and we know it's going to be around forever. If ancient people would ever return to this world, they wouldn't recognize anything. nothing would be recognizable. With one exception, if Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses, would come back, maybe he wouldn't recognize the cars and the planes, but he would recognize the Jews. He would recognize Shabbat. He would recognize kosher. He would recognize Passover. He would recognize tefillin. The tefillin that we wear is the same as the tefillin that Moses wore. No different. He would recognize the mezuzahs on our doorposts. He would feel very comfortable going into a Jewish community today. Yeah, there are some differences. There were some rabbinical laws that came later as a protection for the biblical laws, but the basics of Judaism remains intact, and Moses and any other of the ancient people would recognize Judaism today. So what culture is modern? Judaism is the most modern culture. And if a person says, well, how could things not have changed in 3,300 years plus? And the answer is, when Moses brought the Torah, did he anticipate there'd be planes, there'd be computers, there'd be all sorts of technological advances? The answer is Moses didn't make up the Torah. Moses brought the Torah down from God. When God gave the Torah in the year 2448 of creation, God knew the future. He knew there'll be a 20th century, a 21st century. He knew there'll be all sorts of technology, and he knows what will happen in the year 3000 and 4000. He knows what will happen in all of the future. And he gave us the Torah that it applies to every situation, every time, every place in the world. Now, there are some questions in halakhic questions, legal questions about modern technology that we didn't have hundreds of years ago, but there are answers to those questions by digging into the Torah and looking for the underlying principles of Jewish law that apply to modern times as well. And there are some questions that we still don't have definitive answers. I'm not going to go into examples right now because that'll take us a little bit off the subject. So the question is, Judaism is not outdated, but what is Judaism? So this is not going to be just an introductory course to give you some tidbits about Jewish practices. We're going to go into some of the practices in depth as we go on, but I want to talk about defining Judaism. Judaism is not a religion. Or maybe to qualify that somewhat, it's not just a religion. What is the definition of a religion? A religion is about compartmentalizing. There's the time of the day, of the year, where I am here to live for myself. Oh, but I have to pay homage to God. After all, He's the Creator. I have to say, God, thank you. It's nice that you created me. And then go back to my own personal needs. That's not Judaism. Judaism, the Hebrew word that we use for Jewish law is halakha. Halakha means a path, a way of life. Judaism is about how to live every moment of our lives. There is no area of life in which Judaism does not have a message telling us how to live an uplifting life. Judaism is not just a way of life, it is the essence of life. And if I had to find one word, this is not a test, but if you had to find one word to describe Judaism or its uniqueness, what words would you use? You could
Family.
What?
Family.
Family? Okay, family is a good word. I'm sure you're not going to get anything wrong, but this is a test where you can't get it wrong, because Judaism encompasses everything you're going to say, but more. But I'm looking for a word that describes the uniqueness of Judaism, that distinguishes it from every other religion or philosophy of life.
Monotheism?
What? Monotheism, yes, Judaism is, but other religions claim to be monotheistic as well. Muslims claim to be monotheistic.
It's a religion where God is with you all the time.
That's how many words is that? A religion that God is with you all the time. 10 words.
10 words, it makes sense.
Yes.
Light.
Light, that's a beautiful word. Yes, Judaism is about light. But it's a claim that other cultures will also make, that they're also light. Now, they could be wrong about it, but it's still a claim that they make. In fact, secular ideology called itself enlightenment. So it's not unique to Judaism. Okay, my answer, and it's not the only answer, is the word totality. Judaism is totality. It affects every aspect of life, every place in the world, every time period. The earliest work of Kabbalah is called Sefer Yetzirah, the book of creation. And there it says that existence is based on three things. And it uses an acronym, Ashan, smoke. Asham is Olam, world or space, Shana, year or time, and Nefesh, soul or energy. Could you think of anything that doesn't fit into those three? Space, time, or energy? No, I can't think of anything else. Everything is within those three. And Judaism relates to every one of those three. When the Torah describes what happened at Mount Sinai, it says the mountain was covered with smoke. Ashan, smoke. Well, the Hebrew word Ashan is an acronym for Olam, Shana, and Nefesh, for space, time, and energy. That means when the Torah was given, it was given to us to engage, affect, and transform everything from space to time to life to energy. It's all-encompassing. So I have to use two words. It'd be all-encompassing. Now, it could be there are other cultures that may claim that as well, but I think Judaism is still unique to the extent to which every aspect of life is governed by teachings of Torah. A little deeper. When God created the world, we have to believe, if you're just rational, if you follow Torah, then you don't have to base it on rationality. It's in the Torah. But even a rational person who approaches life strictly from a rational perspective, we have to believe that the world was created with a purpose. And that purpose was revealed to the world at Mount Sinai 3,300 years ago. So what Judaism is God's master plan that He gave us to show us how we fulfill the very purpose for which the universe was created, not just the earth, the whole universe. The whole universe revolves around the earth. Does that mean physically? I don't know what the astronomers will say. They'll probably tell you the earth is nothing. But Judaism says the earth is where it's all about. The whole universe revolves around the earth, not physically necessarily, but conceptually. And within the earth, it all revolves around the land of Israel, Yerushalayim, the Holy Temple. In terms of space, in terms of personality, in terms of energy, it revolves around the Jewish people in particular, who were given this special mission to bring the master plan to fruition by way of the observance of all the commandments. And through our own observance of the commandments and through our inspiration, we also affect and change the rest of the world, the rest of humanity. Every human being has a purpose in this world. But the special mission was given to the Jewish people, and they fulfill this mission only by being committed to the teachings of Torah. And if Jews would have abandoned Judaism, then the whole purpose of creation would have been thwarted, would have been undermined, and then there'd be no need for the Jewish people. So what happens, tragically, is when Jews forget about their mission, they're self-destructive. We lose our own identities and we disappear. There was once a scientist who became a chassid, Velvel Green, and he worked for NASA. And his job, he was a microbiologist, and his job was to prepare the spaceships for space travel. And they dealt mostly with theoretical aspects of it, because of course we're not ready to fly to another star. And they figured out that if they'd have to reach the closest star, Alpha Centauri, I think it is. I was never there, so I can't remember the sign when you enter that star. But that star, to get there, would take about 1,000 years. It's about two light years away. It'll take about 1,000 years. So no one lives 1,000 years. So they would have to get families in the spaceships, and the families would have children, and the children would have children. And that way, in 1,000 years, they would get to that star. Any volunteers? Well, but then what happens 700 years into this flight? The great-great-great-great-grandchildren of the original astronauts decided, why are we going in this direction? Let's change direction. Well, that's the end of the mission. The 1,000-year mission was just totally destroyed. And he used that as a metaphor for Judaism, that we were given this special mission, a mission that it takes us thousands of years. Apparently it took us, Mashiach could have come before, but he didn't come before, so it's already 3,300 plus years, actually from creation itself. It's even more than that we are on this mission to reach this goal of making the world a world that God had in mind when he created it. It's just like a person wants to build a house. So first he has a concept in his mind. What kind of house do I want? I want a house with so many bedrooms, so many bathrooms, so many other rooms. And then you put the idea into practice. Well, God had that original plan that he conceived of, and that's the goal of every mitzvah that we do, is to bring the world to the fulfillment of that master plan. And that's why Judaism is not just an ancient religion that has passed through all periods and remained intact. We are on this mission leading inexorably to a goal, and every day we get closer and closer to that goal. And that's why there was once a Hasidic Rebbe, I think it was the Chose of Lublin, the seer of Lublin, who whenever he looked at a clock and he heard the clock ticking, it would make him happy. Some people, when they looked at the clock and made it was ticking, got them sad. That's a minute or a day closer to my demise. But he looked at it, I'm a day closer to the coming of Mashiach. In other words, every day that goes by, especially a day that we fill with meaning, with purpose, with fulfillment, we're getting closer and closer to the realization of God's original plan that he had at the beginning of creation. And we will realize that very soon. That's the consensus of every great spiritual leader in Judaism, that we are on the threshold of the Messianic age. And that's perhaps why, a little bit more than perhaps, that there's so much evil in the world. Because evil is recognizing that it's soon going to go out of business. And when you go out of business, you put up a big sign, going out of business. You know the story of the guy who was not doing very well in his business, but he sees a neighbor of his putting up a big sign, grand opening, and big crowds were coming there. Another person was going out of business and put up a sign. So he says, I'm going to do better than I'll put both signs on my business. Grand opening, going out of business. But evil is going out of business, and we're ready for the grand opening of a new world. Yes?
Rabbi, why would you say evil is going out of business if evil is an agent of Hashem?
It has been, but it's not a permanent agent. It's a temporary agent. The Messianic age will witness the disappearance of evil incrementally. But before that happens, as I mentioned in an earlier class, the good and evil that have always been intermingled are separating. And when they separate, good becomes more potent. That's why we're seeing more good in this world. But at the same time, the evil becomes more potent temporarily before it loses every bit of its energy that it got by siphoning off energy from the good, and the evil will disappear. But meanwhile, the evil is more potent. That's why in the 20th century, we saw the worst evil in all of history, and we're seeing it now. In fact, Hamas, I forgot the name of the person, but a very good spokesman, non-Jewish, pointed out that Hamas is even worse than the Nazis, because the Nazis got sick because of what they did during the day. So at night they had to get drunk because they couldn't take the inhuman treatment that they were forced to engage in. Not forced, but they volunteered to do it, of course. But they still felt some guilt. These murderers, the Hamas murderers, did it with glee. So in a certain sense, it's even worse than the Nazis. It's hard for me to say that something could be worse than the Nazis, but it seems that these people, and what's even worse is that the Nazis didn't have many supporters outside of Germany. They had some in Ukraine, they had some in Lithuania and Latvia, but the way that you're seeing tens of thousands of people are marching for the destruction of the Jewish people, this is I think unprecedented. But that's because the evil is going to soon be totally obliterated. At any rate, Judaism is the ultimate fulfillment of God's master plan, and it affects every aspect of our lives. Judaism, if you want to break it down, is three-pronged. There's Torah study. There's no other culture, again, I'm saying this knowing that there could be someone who can show me there's another culture that has the same thing, but I don't know of any, that has such an emphasis on Torah study, not just as a means to an end. You study astronomy because you want to become an astronomer. And some people just study astronomy because they enjoy it. But it's not mandated. You're not obligated to study astronomy. Unless if you want to become an astronomer, you better study astronomy. If you want to become a physician, you better study medicine. Some people enjoy the study of medicine without practicing it, but that's optional. Judaism, it's not optional. Jews are obligated to study Torah even if it doesn't lead to application of the teachings of the Torah. That's one aspect of Torah where we use it to learn how to live as a Jew. But learning Torah as a separate entity, as an independent exercise, just engaging our minds with God's wisdom is an end unto itself, in addition to it being a means to an end. So that's one prong of Judaism, Torah study, which is what we're doing now. The second one is mitzvah observance, fulfilling the commandments. There were 613 commandments. Most of them we cannot observe today. Many of them only apply to certain conditions and situations. But we still have a few hundred that we still fulfill today. And then there's prayer. Prayer, you could say, is also one of the commandments, but besides being an individual commandment, it's a separate entity that God wants to have a conversation with us, and He wants us to converse with Him. And that's what prayer is. Prayer is where we say to God, God, let's talk. Let's discuss things. Let's communicate. So those are the three prongs of Judaism. Yes?
You see that as three separate prongs. I see that as one prong.
Well,
I see Torah study as mitzvahs.
You're 100% right. It's the three prongs because there are three different focuses. Torah study is mostly cerebral, it's the mind. Mitzvahs is mostly physical, and prayer is the heart. Prayer is you say the words, but you're expressing your feelings. So a human being can't just separate his brain from his heart, from his body. It's all one organic unit. So you're 100% right. Torah study, mitzvahs, and prayer are all one organic unit, but they're in three different areas of our experience. There's a myth that Judaism does not put a focus on faith. The other religion puts the greatest focus on faith and much less so on actual practice. If you accept their Savior, you'll be saved, no matter how you behaved. Judaism, the myth goes, does not focus on faith, focuses on observance, on practice, on living a Jewish life, a godly life. There's always a kernel of truth in every myth, in most myths anyhow, and the kernel of truth is that Judaism does put a tremendous amount of emphasis on action, but it doesn't diminish the importance of faith. Faith is referred to as a foundation of Judaism. You can't have a stable building without a good foundation. Is the purpose of the foundation just a foundation? No. If you just build a foundation and you forget to build the structure, then what's the purpose of having the foundation? So we need the structure, but in order for that structure to be stable, you need to have a foundation, and the foundation is faith. So much so that the Maimonides formulated 13 principles of faith, 13 things from the belief in God to the belief in the coming of the Mashiach. They include 13 different areas that we have to believe in. Believe in God, believe in God's greatness, believe in God as the one to whom we relate when we have prayers, God who reveals himself through the prophets and who gave us the Torah through Moses, and the Torah is mutable, cannot be changed, and there is reward and punishment, and there's the Messianic age, and the final 13th one, I didn't list all of them, but the 13th one is that in the Messianic age, the dead will come back to life. Those are the principles of faith that a Jew has to believe in for the structure to have endurance. So this is not... Judaism doesn't focus on faith. It does focus on faith, but in addition to faith, it believes that you have to have the structure. Moreover, the other kernel of truth in that we don't focus on faith is that if someone comes to you and says, "Why should I do a mitzvah?" I don't believe in it. I had this occasion many times. People would say, I don't believe in God, I don't believe in the Torah, I don't believe in mitzvahs. And I would still tell this person, but still do it. Do me a favor. I get brownie points if I get you to put on film. Do it for me. It's okay, I'll do it for you. Now, was that legitimate or not? If the person really doesn't believe in it, then they don't intend to do a mitzvah. But the truth is they do believe in it. Deep down, every Jew has that belief in Judaism. We're seeing this in Israel today. Israel is one of the most secular places in the world for Jews. It's one of the most religious places for Jews. It reminds me of a story. A guy comes from they say it's from Chelm, and he visits the big city, and he comes back and says, "What did you see in the big city?" He says, "I saw a Jew who was a very, very pious Jew. And I saw a Jew who was an atheist. I saw a Jew who was..." And he kept on going on all sorts of contrasts. So the guy from Chelm, the small town, says, "Well, you have those Jews here." He says, "No, in that city, it's the same person." The same person who's the pious Jew is also the atheist. When an atheist tells me he's an atheist, doesn't believe in God, I say, I don't believe in atheists. I don't believe in atheists because you're seeing in Israel today, with all that's happening, there's such a spirit of unity and such a resurgence of Jewish practice that the most secular are saying, Baruch Hashem, thank God, and they're praying to God. There's a famous American saying, "There's no atheist in a foxhole." Well, that's what's happening in Israel today is the equivalent of that. That means deep down they have that faith. It's just buried by so many different things that cover up their true Jewish belief. So, yes, and I saw this happening. Many people who claim to be atheists, and I would challenge them and tell them, do mitzvahs. I guarantee you, a few months of doing mitzvahs, you won't be an atheist anymore. And that always worked. It always happened. And you'll soon see, when we go through the various aspects of a mitzvah, you'll see the reason why that happens, what the dynamic is. Now, as you mentioned before, study of Torah is also a mitzvah, and prayer is a mitzvah, so the focal point is mitzvah. What does mitzvah mean? How do we translate the word mitzvah? If you went to Hebrew school, they would tell you a mitzvah is a good deed. And you can't quarrel with that because every mitzvah is a good deed. But that's not what the word mitzvah means. I would assume that every good deed, if it's truly good, is a mitzvah. It's a mitzvah to do good. But the definition of the word mitzvah is not good deed. There are two translations of the word mitzvah. The basic translation, in simple Hebrew, the word mitzvah means commandment. But there's an Aramaic translation. The word mitzvah is connected to an Aramaic word, and Aramaic is a Semitic language that is connected to Hebrew. The word mitzvah means bond. And we'll go into that, how the word mitzvah, how it applies to the idea of bonding. So what is the purpose of a mitzvah? The purpose of a mitzvah, if it means commandment, is to follow the commander's will. You're in the army, and your sergeant tells you, I want you to go in this direction. You go in that direction. You're in the army. You have to follow orders. So we follow orders when God tells us to do a mitzvah. Now there's a modern trend in some circles where people decide to make up their own mitzvahs. Now, is that good or bad? So the answer is yes. It's both good and bad. There is a concept of Jewish customs. Jewish customs come from the bottom up. People get together and they start doing positive things, and that becomes a custom for that community. And then a custom ultimately becomes part of Jewish practice. There are universal customs and there are local customs, and they're both regarded positively. But when a custom changes the law, it misses the whole point. The whole point is, I am doing this mitzvah not because it makes me feel good, though it's not bad if it makes you feel good, but that's not why I'm doing the mitzvah. I'm doing the mitzvah because this is what God tells me to do. He makes up the rules, not me. It's like a person who tries to bring a gift to someone. Bring flowers. And you know that the host does not like flowers. They're allergic to flowers. But you like flowers. So I'm going to bring flowers to you because I like flowers. Was that a legitimate gesture? No. Why? Because you're doing it for them, not for yourself. Although many people would do a mitzvah because it makes them feel good. And again, I'm not putting that down. That's better than not doing the mitzvah. But if you change the nature of the mitzvah, you do it the way you want to do it, not the way God tells you to do it, then it misses the whole point. So yes, mitzvahs that we make up on our own that have positive value, that don't contradict accepted practice of how a mitzvah should be done, that's something that we applaud and we celebrate. I'll give you an example. Simchat Torah, when the attack happened. Simchat Torah is the most powerful Jewish holiday. In Israel, it's the same day as Shmini Atzeret, but outside of Israel, it's a separate day. And what do we do on Simchat Torah? We take out the Torah and we dance with it. Many people would say that it is the happiest day in the Jewish calendar. Some people will say, well, Purim might be happier. Well, in Simchas Torah, I say Simchas Torah is the happiest day. When Purim comes, I'll argue for Purim. But Simchas Torah is certainly up there. Where does it say in the Torah you're supposed to dance with the Torah on Simchas Torah? Look in the whole Bible. Not a word. Oh, well, maybe the Talmud. Look through the whole Talmud. Not a word about it. It's a custom that started hundreds of years after the Talmud was written. And yet, universally, everyone celebrates Simchas Torah more than any other holiday in the year. It's based on custom. But it's a custom that was there to enhance the celebration of that holiday, which is celebrated by the mandate of the Torah in a specific way. And we enhance that, we embellish that with the custom of dancing with the Torah. So customs are beautiful, but what they contradict God's will, the way He wants us to do a mitzvah, then it's wrong. Okay, so now that we translated the word mitzvah, let's go through. I had a list of at least 20 objectives of a mitzvah. I shortened that list over here to about 14 or 15. So I don't know if we'll get through all of them. No, we probably won't. But first of all, mitzvah as a commandment. Just simply as a commandment. What is the reason why we do the mitzvah? The answer is you don't need a reason. God commanded us to do it. And just like God is not here for something else, everything in this world is here for something else. The table. Why is the table here? Because people want to put their books on the table. They want to eat their meals. It's inconvenient to not have a table. Everything in this world is here for something else. There's one exception, and only one exception. That's God. God is not here for something else. God doesn't exist so He could create a world. The world exists so we could do whatever God wants it to do. But God does not exist for anything else. God is the most essential existence. People childishly ask the question, who created God? But they miss the whole point. God does not have to be created. God is the essential existence. and doesn't depend on anything else. Everything else depends on him. Everything else is here for something else. What's the first word in the Torah? The first letter of the Torah is the letter Bet, Beis. Or if you're from Williamsburg, it's Bais. What does that letter mean? Bereshit means in the beginning, but Rashi says no, it doesn't mean in the beginning, it means because of the beginning. So the first letter of the Torah means because. Our English teachers, when they taught us grammar, he says you never begin a sentence with because. That's not proper English grammar. But the Torah begins with the word because. Why does it begin with the word because? Because the whole creation is here because. Everything in the world is here because of something else. Nothing is here inherently, intrinsically, essentially. Everything is here for something else except for God. How do we connect to that? A mitzvah is God's will. God and his will are one. Maimonides, when he talks about God's attributes, says you can't separate God from his attributes. God and his attributes are all one. We can't even understand what that means. We have a mind. Our mind engages a subject, and the subject and our mind join together. But God doesn't have a separate being, and then he has a mind, and then he has a subject that he learns. We have three things. We have ourselves, our mind, and the subject that we use our mind to absorb. God doesn't have a need for three. God and his mind and the subjects are all one. Everything is contained within him and not separate into different distinct categories. Therefore, God and his will are one. So if God tells us, I want you to do this mitzvah, I want you to observe the Sabbath, that's not here for something else, although it has a lot of benefits, but it's God's will. It's just like God has no because of something else, so too are his will, not because of something else. Let's go putting it down to earth. Down to earth, it means that when we do a mitzvah, we don't have to look for what do I get from the mitzvah. It's the ultimate in a relationship. In a good relationship, whether it's a marriage or a friendship, relationship between parents and children, siblings, whatever relationship we talk about, what's the ultimate relationship when you don't say, what is in it for me? Now, there's a lot in every relationship, and if we wouldn't have selfish reasons, we probably wouldn't get involved in relationships. But we have to realize that there's something deeper in that relationship, and if you can't find the deeper aspect of it, maybe that relationship is not a good one. Our relationship with God has many benefits, many objectives, but the ultimate idea of doing a mitzvah is, I'm doing it because God said so. There was a chassid who became very close to the Rebbe, and the Rebbe showed him a lot of love, as he did to so many other people, but this one had a special relationship. The Rebbe told him that whenever he wants to discuss anything, he could just knock on the door and walk into his room. And once the Rebbe told him, I would like you to do a certain thing. He gave him a project. And the Rebbe started to explain why he wants him to do it. And this chassid, his name is Ruvain Dunin, said, Rebbe, stop. Don't tell me why you want me to do it. I want to do it because you said I should do it. I don't want to hear why you want me to do it. That was the ultimate relationship of a chassid to his Rebbe, to his teacher. And the same thing is true with our relationship with God. We do it because God said so. That's enough. That's the very first aspect of the fulfillment of a mitzvah. The second point, as I mentioned before, God created the world with a purpose. The purpose is to have a dwelling place in this physical world. There's something you will have heard me say dozens, if not hundreds of times. There's a statement in the Midrash that God desired a dwelling place in the lowest of realms. What does that mean? That means that God decided to create a universe. In creating this universe, he created spiritual realms. And there's a whole hierarchy of realms, of worlds. Generally speaking, there are 4 different worlds. And beneath the 4 worlds is the physical world that we inhabit. Why did God create physical worlds? The way he created this world is we don't see God's presence. You have to really search for it. You have to be told about it. You have to meditate on it, reflect on it. It's a world in which God is obscured. That's what the Midrash means when it says God wanted a dwelling place in the lowest of realms. We are the lowest of realms because we are living in a realm where you could have Hamas in it. You could have atheists in it. You could have people who are immoral, who are in every way imaginable ungodly. That's what makes this world unique. And God says, I want that this world, through its own efforts, turn it into a godly world. It's like, to use the metaphor that Jewish sources often use with a king who asks for a palace to be built. But he says, I want this palace to be built in a very, very terrible terrain, a swampland, and I want a beautiful palace. So what do we have to do? We have to drain the swamp, and we have to build this structure, decorate it, paint it, and embellish it. And then the king comes and says, wow, this is an incredible place. God wanted the challenge, I put the word challenge in quotation marks, that he should create an entity that doesn't accept God, and that we reverse that, and we do accept God in this world, and we devote ourselves to his will, and we do everything in our power to make the world a godly world through observance of all the commandments. That is the purpose of a mitzvah. The purpose of a mitzvah is to fulfill the very purpose of creation.
Rabbi,
Yes.
it feels like it's a request that's impossible, but that in following what you said, that God wants us to do it, even if it's impossible, just put in the effort to do it, and that's enough. As long as you are doing it, you're in the process of doing it, even though it's impossible. But you're not asking why, you're just doing it because he said so, even though you know it can't be.
No, it could be. It could be. If God says, that's my plan, it means he knew that it's possible. We have the ability, we have the potential. So you're asking a good question. If we look around the world, we see, except for current people here in this room, everyone else is imperfect. We're the only perfect ones. So how do you have a world with 7 billion people and there's only 15, 20 perfect people? Maybe a few others outside there. They couldn't make it to the class. So how are we going to make this world a perfect world if we're so imperfect? And the answer is, it's in the aggregate of good that we have done for thousands of years. Every mitzvah that you do, that I do, that every Jew has ever done from the beginning of time generates godly energy in this world. And in the aggregate, we have created an explosion of holiness, of goodness in this world. And if we had eyes to see what we accomplished, we would lose our free choice. So God says, I'm going to let you accomplish everything you have to accomplish, but you're not going to see it unless you really meditate on it, reflect on it, and you're a very spiritual person. But otherwise, you won't see the effects of your good deeds, of your mitzvahs. A time will come when we have critical mass, enough of the mitzvahs, that the whole world will see what it accomplished. Now, what about all the evil that was done? So Hasidic thought explains that evil doesn't have permanence. Evil dissipates. The evil of this generation will not be around in another generation because evil people either get punished and that gets rid of the evil, or the evil ceases. People stop doing evil. So evil only has a temporary life. The good is permanent, and therefore we are changing the world irreversibly. That's the theory behind this, that every time we do a mitzvah, we're changing the world, even if we can't feel it and we don't see it. Yes?
So, but when people say they're doing tikkun olam, is that necessarily a mitzvah?
Well, define tikkun olam.
Well, people say it's repairing the world.
I know, that's what it means, but how do they do it? How do they repair the world?
I don't know, picking up trash at at the seaside or something like that.
Okay, picking up trash is helping people. Helping people is a mitzvah, yes. But if the focus is that we have to volunteer for non-Jewish causes and ignore Jewish causes, then it misses the point. Jews are obligated to focus primarily on our own needs and our own interests and our own obligations. But one of our obligations is also to help others who are not Jewish and help them realize their purpose, which is to observe the 7 Noahide commandments. But my problem with the movement of Tikkun Olam is that it's all about what we can do for the bigger, larger world and ignoring what we have to do for the Jewish world. So that's the critique. But if you're helping clearing the garbage and making the world a healthier place, that's a mitzvah. There's no question about it. We'll do one more. Emulating God. We all love art. Most of life is about imitating things. Little children imitate. It's part of human nature to want to replicate things in an art form, to express certain feelings through art. Well, it could be art, music, or whatever the mode is. But whatever let's say a piece of art, you have a beautiful painting of a mountain. The mountain itself is a piece of art. So you're emulating an imitation. The true and ultimate art form is when you emulate God. Because God is the only real thing. God is not art. God is real. So the ultimate art form is when we emulate God. And that's what a mitzvah is. Well, how do we know? How can you emulate God? Well, we look in the Torah and we see what God does. God clothed Adam and Eve. He got them clothing. Big sale at Kmart. He dressed them. So we learn from that when someone doesn't have clothing, and clothing is just a metaphor for whatever needs, you're supposed to provide it. That's a mitzvah. We emulate God. God helped bury Moses, bury the dead. The Torah begins with an act of kindness where God clothes Adam and Eve, and it ends with God burying Moses. So everything in between, from clothing the naked to burying the dead, anything that you do to help another human being is God's way of behavior. That what the Torah tells us about God, we have to emulate that. And in fact, every mitzvah we do, we're emulating God. Putting on tefillin, for example, is emulating God. God also puts on tefillin, not physical tefillin, but spiritual tefillin. So every mitzvah we do is a way of an art form. If you get excited about art, about music, violin, our great violinist has just entered, just at the right time, then you get excited about doing a mitzvah. So in addition to doing a mitzvah because this is what God said He wants us to do, in addition to making God's plan for the universe come to fruition, it's the ultimate art form, and it's very, very powerful and very exciting. Next week, the class will be taught by my daughter-in-law, Bracha Leah, and it's going to be about women's role in Judaism.